Next time you drive the German Autobahn, do something most Americans never do. Count the truck logos. In 30 minutes you will see a Mercedes-Benz Star, a MAN Lion, a Scania Griffin, the iron mark of Volvo, the blue badge of DAF, the red Iveco shield, the diamond of Renault Trucks, and probably a Tatra, a Sisu, or a Ford Trucks Turkey for good measure. That's 9, sometimes 10, sometimes more. Now picture an American interstate, Freightliner, Kenworth, Peterbilt, maybe a Mack, a Volvo, an International. Behind every one of those grilles, only 4 parent companies. Why does Europe have roughly 3 times the truck brands America does, and why isn't the market crushing them down to 2 or 3 giants the way it did here? The surface answer most people give is that Europe just has more countries. But that explanation falls apart the moment you look at the actual map. The real answer is buried inside a 30-year-old EU directive, a single legislative day in 1976 that quietly killed half the American truck industry, and a price-fixing cartel that Brussels nailed in 2016 with the largest competition fine in EU history. And the answer connects to something you have eaten this week without thinking about it once. But let's start with what everyone gets wrong about why those trucks even look the way they do. The most common explanation you will hear is that European trucks look different because the roads are narrower. That is true. It is also useless. Narrow roads explain the shape, not the count. The shape comes from one specific number almost nobody outside the freight industry can tell you. 16.5 meters, EU Directive 9653 EC, signed on the 25th of July 1996, locked every member state into the same maximum length for an articulated truck, 16.5 meters total, 40 tons gross weight, 4 meters tall. That single piece of regulation became the dimension of the entire European supply chain. Every loaf of bread, every pallet of vaccines, every Amazon parcel that crosses an EU border is moved inside that exact envelope. The number is not a guideline. It is the size of European logistics itself. And the moment you have only 16.5 meters to play with, geometry takes over. Every centimeter of tractor cab is a centimeter you cannot put trailer behind. The cabover wins the math without a fight, because a flat-faced cab is the shortest possible way to seat a driver in front of a load. American truckers gave that design up the moment they did not have to use it. European truckers cannot, because the law will not let them. But here's what most explanations stop at. They tell you cabovers exist because of length. They do not tell you why that produced more brands. The directive harmonized the dimensions across what would become 27 member states. It did not consolidate who got to manufacture inside those dimensions. Length law is why European trucks are flat. But length law alone does not explain why Mercedes, MAN, Scania, Volvo, Renault, DAF, Iveco, Tatra, Sisu, and Ford Trucks all still exist as distinct brands today. That is the next layer down, and it is not engineering. It is politics. The deeper answer is that every major European country built its own truck industry as a strategic national asset after the Second World War, and almost none of them have ever been allowed to die. These weren't just companies, they were national champions, state-supported, sometimes state-owned, always politically protected. Mercedes-Benz and MAN are Germany's. Scania and Volvo are Sweden's. DAF is the Netherlands. Renault Trucks is France's. Iveco is Italy's. Iveco was born in 1975 from a single merger that combined Fiat's truck division with OM, Lancia, Magirus Deutz, and Unic. 5 flags collapsed into one, and yet the brand was still preserved as a distinct identity. A truck brand in post-war Europe wasn't a brand. It was the company that built the army's transports, the country's fire engines, the dump trucks rebuilding bombed-out cities. Killing one of those names politically was unthinkable. Therefore, when consolidation finally came, and it did come, brutally, the brands themselves did not die. They were preserved on purpose. Volkswagen bought Scania over an 8-year crawl, starting with an 18.7% stake in April 2000 and taking full control by January 2015, and never once put a Volkswagen logo on a Scania truck. The Griffin stayed. PACCAR, the American owner of Kenworth and Peterbilt, bought DAF and never tried to badge a European DAF as a Kenworth. Volvo Group bought Renault Trucks in 2001 and kept the Renault Diamond. Daimler Truck owns both Freightliner and Mercedes-Benz trucks today, but you will never see a 3-pointed star on the front of an American Freightliner. And this connects to something sitting in your kitchen right now, but we will get to that. Now compare America. There were once dozens: White Motor Company, Sterling, Diamond REO, Brockway, Autocar. Today, 99.9% of every Class 8 truck sold in the United States comes from 7 brands owned by 4 parent companies. The market simply consolidated, and the names that did not survive were allowed to disappear. Brussels stopped that from happening on its side of the Atlantic. The EU Competition Authority blocked the 1999 Volvo-Scania merger outright, on the grounds that combining them would have created nearly 100% market share across the Nordic countries. 2 Swedish competitors, same nation, Brussels still said no. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. The single moment that defined this whole transatlantic split happened on a specific legislative day in 1976. Until 1976, the United States ran a chaotic patchwork of state-by-state truck length laws. Most states capped overall combined length at 65 feet. American highways in the 1960s and the early 70s were full of cabovers, flat-faced sleeper tractors that look almost identical to what you see in Europe today. Then the federal government pulled the floor out from under that design philosophy. Length restrictions were lifted. By the time the Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982 was finished, the cab itself was excluded from federal length calculations entirely, and the federal weight limit was raised to 80,000 pounds. Within roughly a decade, the heavy-duty cabover went functionally extinct on American highways. Manufacturers whose identity was built around that design got picked apart. White Motor Company collapsed in 1980. Sterling, Daimler's revival of the old Ford heavy truck line, was discontinued in 2009. Brockway, owned by Mack, was shut down in 1977. Here is the absurd, compressed time detail. In a single week in July 2000, over 2 consecutive days, Daimler Chrysler acquired Western Star for $449 million, while simultaneously hunting international trucks. The American truck industry consolidated faster in those 12 months than the European industry had in the previous 50 years. Now ask why Europe couldn't go through the same compression. The answer is the EU itself. The European Coal and Steel Community was founded in 1951, specifically to prevent any single country's heavy industry from dominating the others. The 1996 Weights and Dimensions Directive harmonized the rules without harmonizing the makers. It was a continent built by design to keep many builders alive at once. And this is the part nobody talks about. Even when Europe did try to consolidate trucking, it did so quietly and got caught. In July 2016, the European Commission fined Daimler, DAF, Iveco, MAN, and Volvo's Renault Trucks division a combined €2.93 billion for running a price-fixing cartel for 14 years, from 1997 to 2011. Scania refused to settle and was fined an additional €880 million in September 2017. The total was €3.81 billion. At the time, it was the largest cartel fine in EU history. Therefore, this should change how you see it. The reason Europe has so many truck brands isn't free market competition. It's that the EU spent 4 decades preventing monopoly and extinction at the same time. And now we see how all of this lands inside your apartment, your fridge, and the price of nearly everything you've bought online this year. Every imported European car on an American dealership lot, every BMW, every Audi, every Mercedes-Benz, every Volvo, every Volkswagen wrote on the back of a Mercedes, MAN, Scania, or Volvo truck through a European logistics center before it ever reached a port. Most EU manufactured pharmaceuticals, insulin, statins, generics, and vaccines move on Iveco, DAF, or Mercedes refrigerated trailers before they cross the Atlantic. Every product on a US grocery shelf labeled Made in Italy, Made in France, or Made in Germany was moved at some point inside that 16.5-meter envelope by a brand that exists because somebody, somewhere, in 1996 or 2001 or 2008 decided not to let it die. European truck stops are designed around shorter, more numerous rigs. American truck stops are designed around 75-foot conventional rigs with sleeper berths bigger than studio apartments. 2 continents, 2 industrial philosophies, both visible in the parking lot. But here is the part that changes everything. While America's brand list is still shrinking, Sterling discontinued in 2009, Western Star was absorbed in 2000, International was acquired by Traton in 2024, and Europe's list is actually growing. Ford trucks. Turkey has been climbing the European market share rankings for 3 straight years. Chinese electric truck brands are entering aggressively. The others category in EU, heavy-duty market share data, has risen from roughly 10% to 13% since 2024. America is still consolidating. Europe is still fragmenting. So here's where you actually land. You drove past that European truck stop thinking you were looking at a chaotic mix of nationalist branding and leftover quirks of countries that had not gotten the consolidation memo. You drove past an American truck stop thinking you were looking at a streamlined modern industry that had simply moved past all that. But what you were actually looking at was a 1996 EU directive that locked truck length at 16.5 meters for an entire continent. A 1976 American deregulation that killed the cabover and triggered 50 years of brand death, 6 countries refusing to let their national champions disappear, a European competition authority that has blocked every merger that would create a monopoly, a 3.81 billion euros price-fixing cartel that confirmed those brands are still so distinct they could be caught colluding as separate entities, and roughly 80 years of post-war industrial policy still embedded in the front grille of every Mercedes, MAN, Scania, Volvo, DAF, Iveco, and Renault rolling down a highway tonight. That row of logos you used to find unfamiliar is the visible edge of the longest-running engineered tie between law, geography, and protected industry on Earth. You are not just looking at trucks. You are looking at a continent that decided, decade after decade, that having many builders mattered more than having efficient ones. And if you think European truck brands are strange, wait until we get into why almost every Japanese truck looks identical, even though there are 6 of them.